Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Bitter, and today I have a guest interview for you. Actually, I said that wrong. It's multiple guests. So we have 3 guests for you today on the show. And the reason for that is we're going to talk a little bit Western States 100. So this week, the Western States 100 is kicking off. And for those of you who are familiar or semi-unfamiliar, there's an interesting stat with Western States is because you can only have so many people on a certain portion of that route at any given time, there's a limited number of positions every year, but it's also one of the more popular events to try to get into. So if you were to decide, I want to run the Western States 100 today, and you went and you ran a qualifying race that allows you to enter the lottery, and you entered the lottery for the first time, you'd have less than a 1% chance of having your lottery ticket drawn. Now, it gets better every year you enter, so you do get rewarded the more years you enter, and you have a higher percentage of getting your lottery ticket pulled because you just get more of them for every subsequent year that you apply. But it's tough to get into. And there are other ways to get in. You can race in, you can get in through a sponsorship spot. And yeah, there's those options as well. So we'll talk about kind of how our guests today got into the Western States 100 and what they plan on doing. We go over some interesting things, just like what it was like to train for it, prepare for it, what their expectations are on the day of. One of the unique reasons about this episode, I thought, was because 2 of the guests, Callie and Scott, are a couple, and they are also running it at the same year. So Nicole, my wife, is running it this year. I'm not. So I'm kind of the odd man out, or the fanboy, so to speak, when it comes to Western States this year, but I'll be out there crewing and pacing. But nevertheless, Nicole and I actually both ran it together in 2018. So we thought it'd be a fun topic episode to do with some guests on just how you're preparing for these races when your partner is also preparing for it, how the schedule lines up, where the variances are, because as you can imagine with these long races, there's some uniqueness in everyone's training plan. There's some uniqueness in everyone's fueling plan and all the and expectations too. So how that all kind of fits. Before we get rolling, though, just a little bit about the guests. We have one of them is Callie Vinsonn, and Callie is a very interesting person. In fact, I could have Callie back on for a whole nother topic if I wanted to, because she at one point lost 200 pounds through endurance sport. And on that journey, she actually ran a 240-mile race. I believe it was the Moab 240. And along the way, she also brings awareness to Rising Hearts and has gotten into Western States through the GU sponsorship this year. So we're excited to see how Callie does and what she's able to do with her day out there on the Western States Trail. Scott actually raced in, and he raced in one of the 2 ways, which is you can either get in by finishing in the top 10 the prior year. So last year's top 10 men's and women's field all get automatic entry if they want that back into the Western States. You can also get in by running in through a series of golden ticket races where the top 2 individuals on the men's and women's side get those automatic entrants into Western States. So Scott's a little unique in that last year he got 10th, so he got in automatically. But the year before that, the way he got in is he raced in through one of those golden ticket races, which was the Black Canyon 100-kilometer, where he got 2nd place in 2022. Since then, though, he's been doing a little bit of racing and a lot of training, and along the way, he won the Javelina 100-kilometer, and then also just recently won the Crown King 50-kilometer, which is a really cool race in Arizona where you actually just basically run uphill the whole time, and you end in this really, really tiny little area, and the finish line is actually right at the front of an old bar. So fun historic event. Scott was the first one up the top of that this year in what I imagine was a tune-up race for the Western States 100. And then, of course, Nicole, my wife, you've probably, if you've listened to this show more than just this episode, you probably recognize how she got in, but her racing has been just cruising along lately. She had a 3rd place finish at the highly competitive Javelina 100-mile, which left her 1 spot away from getting her Western States spot, but turned things around a couple months later and ended up getting 2nd place to Courtney DeWalter at the Bandera 100-kilometer here in Texas, which got her that golden ticket spot and the entrance to Western States this year. So she has been laying a little bit lower on the race side of things between January and now in order to make sure that she's got all the things prepared and ready to go for the big one at Western States this year. And I've ran Western States twice, so I've got some perspective. I've actually crewed it a bunch of times, including Nicole a few times and paced as well for multiple other people. So I'm very familiar with kind of the ins and outs of how that day goes. And I was just interested, like, what are the people doing to prepare for the various aspects of this course, which oftentimes has really different characteristics throughout the day, where in the beginning in the high country, you might run through snow, which it looks like they're going to be doing this year. Then you dip down into the canyons, which sometimes it can hit above 100 degrees. Doesn't look like it's going to get that hot this year, but the interesting thing this year will be after they trudge through the snow up in the high country, when they do get down in the canyons and start coming back up, they're going to have to go through a section of that course that had a lot of fire damage from last year. And that fire damage is making it a lot more exposed, meaning there were some spots that used to provide a little bit of shade that are now wide open. And in a Northern California trail, that means a lot more oppression from that sun. So we'll see how that all plays out and makes the field shake out with everything. But yeah, I won't say too much more about it and let the guests share their experience training for and preparing and what their expectations are. Everything goes into that once we let them back on. Before we get rolling, though, just a couple quick announcements. Outliers ATX is a group run I host on Sunday mornings. We meet at 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. 9 a.m. is our typical starting time, but now that the temperatures are picking up, we're probably going to expect a lot of people to shift down to that 8 a.m. start time. But either way, you'll have people there. We meet at Metz Park. Details from one week to the next is just on the Instagram page at Outliers ATX. If you live in Austin or visiting, feel free to stop by, say hi, run some miles with me and some of the people here who are heading out onto some Sunday morning running. Also, if you are interested in coaching, whether it be one of my coaching plans that are pre-made or working one-on-one with me or just signing up with a consultation to chat about whatever topics you want, you can find that stuff on my website at zachbitter.com. Also, if you would like to support the podcast specifically, there is a landing page for that, which is at zachbitter.com/HPO. From there, you can link to the show's Patreon page, which does get you early release ad-free episodes. So they jump right into it. And also other support options if you don't want to go on Patreon, but you want to support the show through a donation. But really what goes a long way, if you want to really help out, is to simply subscribe on your favorite platform so you automatically get the podcast episodes downloaded to whatever player you use, or share the episodes on social media. In fact, going forward, once per month, what I'm going to do is I'm going to collect anytime someone shares an episode on social media and tags me with that share. And I'm just going to write down on a form who they are. And at the end of each month, I'm actually going to raffle off a free consultation. So if you want to get entered into a raffle to win a free consultation, just share whatever episode you enjoy on social media, tag me, you're entered. One final announcement before we get rolling, just a quick shout out to the show sponsors this year. Those include Element-T Electrolytes and Delta G Ketones. Element-T Electrolytes is currently running a promotion where you can try out all their flavors in a sample pack for free with your first purchase. Right now is a great time to try that out too, because they have their limited edition grapefruit flavor on their catalog at the moment. If you do that and you get that free sample pack, you'll also get citrus, watermelon, orange, grapefruit, like I mentioned, raspberry, chocolate, mango chili, raw, unflavored. All you got to do to access that is use the show URL, which is going to be in the show notes. But for those of you listeners, it's going to be drinklmnt.com/HPO to get you that free sample pack option. What you get with their electrolytes is each little convenient packet comes with 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, 60 milligrams of magnesium. For me, that means about one of those packets in about 2 liters of fluid. I'll usually have a little bit of chocolate with my coffee in the morning, and then I'll have that ratio built into my hydration if I'm heading out for a longer session in the morning, especially if it is hot. Also supporting the show this year is Delta G Ketones. This year, I added a new product to my training and racing routine. The latest research on exogenous ketones motivated me to consider trying them out. I've been using Delta G formulation mainly because all the research showing promising benefits in recovery and performance have been done using their formula. So when it came to deciding which exogenous ketone do I want to try playing around with during the year, Delta G stood out. I was really fortunate that on their website at deltagketones.com, you can actually sign up for a free consultation, and they will actually look at what you're doing and help you decide whether it's a good idea or not to introduce some exogenous ketones into your training or your lifestyle, and specifically how to do it. So for example, for me, what this means is if I'm doing a big workout or a key workout, I'll just take 1 bottle of Delta G Ketones Performance and head out for the workout. If I'm doing something longer, like a race, like a 100-mile race, I'll take one of those before, and then about every 3 hours afterwards. So they kick in about 15 minutes or so. And that's when you can start to see that concentration in your blood show up. So usually if it's before something, I'll try to take it around that amount of time before the start of it. One of the reasons, like I said, Delta G stuck out to me is they actually are the ketone ester that received the DARPA grant in effort to design the formula for special forces. Since then, Delta G has produced 50 plus published studies and are part of 20 plus ongoing studies. These studies include 2 very recent ones that explored exogenous ketone relationship with increasing natural levels of EPO, as well as increasing circulating dopamine concentration, improving mental alertness, and improving post-exercise inflammation in endurance athletes. So check out Delta G's research and their product line at deltagketones.com. Like I said, there you can also sign up for a free consultation to dive into the research, usage, and whether it is beneficial for you. It's been a while, I think, since we had 4 people on the show, but today I have a guests interview, and it's going to be a bit of a Western States kind of tune-up preview type of episode. So got Scott, Callie, and Nicole, who are all 3 in the race, who I'm imagining all have prepared in at least slightly different ways. And then there's me, who's kind of the odd man sitting out this year in terms of Western States. So I get a fanboyed up and kind of hear about everything that you guys going on, but probably I have the least amount of nerves out of all 4 of us in this group right now.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, how are you guys doing?
I'm good. I don't feel like I put any pressure on myself ever to race. I did when I was younger coming up. Now, I don't know. I'm getting old. It doesn't matter. I know, to me, I just got to go do my best. If I do my best, I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, I had a great coach who knows the course very well, and I was able to go to the training camp. So getting a firsthand experience of the course, I mean, this will definitely be a challenge for me because it's the first 100 I've done with a bit of climbing and a lot of descending. So I'm excited about it. I love racing in the heat, so I'm excited for that too.
Yeah, the training camp is definitely a huge, I think, thing to have available to you if you haven't done the race before. I know I've been to that a few times. Nicole, you've been to it a few times, and it's just, gives you that pretty much almost the entire look at the course, other than that first roughly 50K, which obviously would be nice to see that too, but winter usually has something to say about that. So you have to settle for 71 miles of the course?
Yeah, just about.
Well, and you all are based in Phoenix, which is pretty advantageous. So we've done the race from Phoenix, and we've seen all of your climbs at Mount Ord, and we were just rolling our eyes, or at least I was like, oh, all the Mount Ord climbs. It definitely brought back memories, but that's like a sneaky great place to train.
It is. Yeah. I'd never run there until he mentioned it. And I feel like we live there by now. He actually had his last day at Mount Ord yesterday. So it was like a goodbye. I'll see you next season. But that's a great place. If you're in Phoenix, it's a great place for training to get climbing in. You're still getting that heat. But yeah, it's just constant up, down, up, down.
And remind me this, because I think it's a weird statistic, but somebody told me, and this might be wrong, but there's like the highest square foot concentration of like mountain lions out there. I mean, not to scare you, but I thought that was like what I think
Glad
somebody
we're done with
probably
that.
said that to me. And I was just like, I've never let it go. And it was probably like completely wrong, but that's like what sticks out at me, because it's such an isolated kind of area. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I shouldn't have even said that, but it all, like, every time I'm out there, I would think like,
You're like,
oh my God, this is weird.
They're probably down in that valley you look
Yeah,
at
I
the
think
top.
Yeah.
That's
That's so funny because
myself when we were
the
out
last time I was there, I got to, the parking lot that's almost at the top, and there were people camping there. And one guy goes, "Aren't you afraid of mountain lions out here?" And I just kind of brushed it off like, that's crazy. And now I'm like, he was onto something.
Yeah, somebody said that to me. I can't remember who, but I remember like I've never lost sight of that. So I was kind of
no.
like, I like having a friend out here.
Yeah. That's good to know now.
Sorry, I shouldn't have said.
Well, there's mountain lions on the course too, so you've got to
Yeah.
be worried as well on race day.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't
Thankfully, I
stand
think
that.
they get scared away pretty quickly out there. So,
Yeah. You can scare them away for me. I'll be in the back.
yeah, sweep it out of the way. Well,
Yeah.
one thing I do want to jump into with all of you a little bit here is just kind of just the prep that you use to get into Western States. I know it's just such a wild event in the sense that if you get in through the lottery, it's like Christmas times 10, right? Because if you're a first year lottery ticket owner, you got like less than a 1% chance. If you race in, I mean, that's even probably a worse chance to be able to race in terms of like the statistics of what the likelihood of it is. So it's like just ending up in the race in the first place is usually sometimes a multi-year process. A lot of energy goes into the planning for it, but you don't always get in at the same time either. It's like you get in through a top 10 from the year prior. Like Scott, you were 10th last year, if I'm not mistaken. So you knew in June last year, if you wanted to come back, that you'd have a spot. And then Callie, you got into the lottery, if I'm not mistaken?
No, I'm actually a sponsored runner. So I'm in with GU and Rising Hearts.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so they have a sponsored bib and they invited me, what was that, late December, and asked if I wanted it. I had my eyes actually on Cocodona again, and as soon as I got this opportunity, like you're saying, the statistics, someone might be able to race this. I was like, Cocodona will be there next year. I'm going for Western States.
I did the exact same thing in 2018. I was training for a 24-hour track event, and I found out sponsor spot. I actually got it late because the person who was going to have it ended up pulling out. I think they had, I think I'm remembering this right. They had an injury and it was just not going to resolve itself by race day. So they wanted to give me as much headway as possible. So it was like, all right, Western States, I guess. You cancel everything for that one. Yeah. And then we have Nicole, who attempted to get in October last year through Javelina and was one spot away from a golden ticket, but then was able to get in through Bandera with the race there. So
Yeah.
all in all, I guess all of you got in relatively early, considering what it can be if you're racing in is Canyon's the last one now?
Yeah, Canyon's the last one.
Yeah. So that gives you, I guess, a reasonable good buildup. I always try to think of it as like, if you can have 24 weeks, you're looking at a pretty good timeline, at least the way I like to prepare. It gives you a chance to kind of confirm your base, do some speed work, and then get to the course specific stuff later in the plan. So I'd kind of like to hear a little bit about that. I know, Scott, you just mentioned that you finished your final long run at Mount Ord, and I did do a little stalking. I believe it was a 20-miler at Mount Ord.
Yep.
And it's an interesting topic outside of just the training in general. I think with ultra running, one of the things I think has shifted a bit since I started doing this is just the way people approach long runs in proximity to the race. Whereas a lot of marathoners or endurance athletes, they'll oftentimes start peeling back on that much sooner. But with ultras, since the intensity is so low, I think there's some application to kind of keeping at least a semblance of a long run in there a little bit sooner. So we're about a week and a half out from States, and you still had one long run in the books.
Yeah. But yeah, like you said, so I'm moving that long run. It's moving at 100-mile effort, using my nutrition protocol, all of that stuff. So the intensity is really low. I don't know if you're looking at heart rate, maybe 10 beats below aerobic threshold, then it's such a low intensity workout. And for someone that runs usually pretty high volume, like the load of that on my body, I'm not concerned with, being 10 days out, having any sort of fatigue lingering. And for me, it was important. I wanted to get one more downhill stressor. So that was the main goal of getting out to Ord. I wanted to do some downhill. And so, yeah, I felt pretty good with that. And now I'll be doing probably a pretty aggressive taper, probably a little less running than I typically would. But I feel prepared in terms of the race and what I need to do.
Awesome. Callie, how about you? Are you doing a long run yet, or have you finalized all of those?
Well, I have, what do I have scheduled? Saturday.
One day at a time.
Yeah. Saturday I've got 2 hours on the schedule, so that's not aggressive for me. And then about an hour or so for Sunday. So the taper is for real starting like Monday. I'll do like 45 minutes or 30 minutes 2 days later. And the 2 hours shouldn't be too crazy, but Yeah, it's funny how we've approached training very differently, but yet still doing the same race. You're so used to, well, you can speak for yourself, but he's used to a higher volume. Me, I'm so prone to foot injuries that we had to be like very easy on like how much load I could do a week. But this is the first time I've switched, or I've utilized a time-based training versus mileage-based, and I feel like that's helped a lot too, to get to where I am, still healthy, knock on wood, for the race. So yeah, I've learned a lot of new things this training cycle, and I like it.
Cool. I mean, on the theme of the long run too, I'll let Nicole share her long run approach, but I do find that interesting as well. Is just, it seems like another conversation in ultra running right now is just how do you even do the long run? Because historically, it just sort of intuitively made sense, I think, to do like a very, very long run. It's like, well, we run in 100 miles. That might mean, half a day out there sometimes if you're going to really kind of stretch it out. And certainly even at the Western States training camp, that first day, a lot of times that's going to be quite a long run, even for the people finishing in the front. So one thing that I think is maybe, I wouldn't say it's taken over by any stretch of the imagination, but it's also just a strategy some people are using where they're maybe doing less of those really, really long runs and sticking closer to some more frequent long runs that are a little bit more traditional. Nicole, how do you look at your long run?
Yeah, I think my training has evolved a bit. I would also agree, like I'm getting older. So I've kind of changed how I train for this, and I've done less in terms of long run distance. So this year I didn't do anything beyond a 50K in terms of long run, just because I didn't really feel like it was going to be that beneficial to me on race day. So I feel like I tend to get even mentally fatigued when I do too many long runs. Like I feel like that I'm just like exhausted for the next week, and it's just hard for me to like sustain being excited. So I kind of mixed it up this year and did even a lot of road running to build up with long runs. And so then oftentimes, it's less of in terms of time, it's less running involved. And oftentimes then I just do other cross training in the rest of like the weekend just to mix it up. So I really love to rollerblade, bizarrely enough. So I'd go and rollerblade, like bring back the 90s, I guess. I'm like waiting, I guess.
The 90s are back.
Movie.
So
yeah. So there's this cool place in Austin that's like a 3-mile biking and rollerblade it's reserved for those specific focuses. So you can't even run on it. So it's just brilliant. And oh my gosh, the outfits you see out there are
I bet.
like it's me and like the 50 to 60-year-old men that rollerblade. And I'm telling you, it's like I love it. So just things like that to keep it more exciting. And that's kind of, but I would say like my mileage is still fairly high, but it's lower than it used to be, and not as definitely not as long runs.
Yeah, I think I'd love to hear what both of you do from like a peak long run standpoint, because I do find it interesting in terms of, we say run, right? But then I know, Scott, you mentioned like 100-mile intensity, where I think that's where it really becomes interesting with this topic is you could do a long run, but then ultimately a lot of people on a course like Western States are going to do a fair bit of hiking. So I think like when you start bringing it back to Westerns or like 100-mile race intensity, for a lot of people, sometimes that could mean, yeah, I'm going to go for a long run, but a chunk of it's going to be hiking like it will be on race day. And therefore the actual running being done is going to be closer to what we traditionally maybe see, but the overall time out there is going to be longer. And that's going to give you that opportunity to, practice your gear, your fueling, hydration, and all that stuff. Is that kind of how both of you look at it, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, from a coaching and athletic perspective, it's, the strategy to me, I always tell athletes, in any given cycle, you can maybe get fit enough to shave some minutes off of a race. But if you become very good at strategy, you can, especially in the middle of the pack, you can shave hours off of a race. So, and the only way I think to test it effectively is to move at the effort you're going to move at on race day, because if you're moving faster, you're going to digest differently. Same thing with heat, if you're moving faster. So to me, that's a big part of the final 8 or 10 weeks of training, is just dialing in all of those pieces so that when you're at the start line, you're confident in every aspect of the race. And even so, that's not going to mean it's going to go perfect, but at least you're there, you're confident, you know what to do. And then just training the gut for, I'm a very high carbohydrate intake hourly. So it just takes a while to get that kind of volume comfortable. So that's generally what I focus on for 2 months, is getting all that food in, practicing. And, the fluid intake is huge at Western States. So getting comfortable taking in, 32, 38 ounces every single hour after hour. A lot of athletes can't do that. Unfortunately, here in Phoenix, it's so hot that, your sweat rate's so high. It's doesn't make it easy to do, but now for me to take in that much fluid is second nature. And I think that's really advantageous on a course like Western States.
Yeah, and for me, the long run, this was my first time also utilizing more liquid calories for fueling, and that was something that I really wanted to focus on for my long runs. Prior to training for Western States, I was incorporating liquids but also solids, but I've always experienced stomach issues, and so I don't know, there was something where I was just like, I need to try focusing on liquids. Maybe that's what I'm missing here. And ever since doing so, I've had like 0 stomach issues. So I'm hoping that stays the same for the race. But I mean, every long run, I have just rehearsed as if it's, Western States race day, like my nutrition, gear, like you were mentioning. And so far, yeah, all that's been going good. I've done a lot of rehearsal. So
yeah, I think it's a fun topic because there's just so much different approaches when it comes to like what people are going to eat or not eat. Maybe is sometimes the better question on race day.
Yeah.
Are you guys targeting a specific amount of grams per hour, or have you gotten that kind of nailed down?
Yeah, I generally am in between 105 and 115 grams an hour. So it's definitely on the higher end, and I definitely wasn't hitting those many years ago. I think with some of the research and some of the products that are out now, it helps me do that. And doing that, I don't know, the past 2 or 3 years, I think I've shown a lot of success that I've had. And I don't think it's just due to that, but all of the strategy pieces involved, I think, really have helped me. But yeah, that high carbohydrate count I think it helps me late. I never feel low on energy late in these races. And I remember early in my career, it was almost like Russian roulette. I never knew how the last 30 or 40 miles were going to feel or go. Whereas now, I can't remember the last time where I was bonking or something during a race. So I'm feeling really good about strategy going in.
Yeah, you got it dialed in. I remember I was reading after UTMB this last year. I think it was Killian and Tom Evans who were 1 and 3, so they were moving right along, you could say. I think they were both about 100 grams per hour. And the actually thing that I was kind of surprised, it sounds like you've taken a little bit of a different approach to it, was Killian mentioned that he's only hitting like 20 grams per hour in training at any point in time. And I just thought that was where it was like hard for me to wrap my head around. I can understand the gut training principle and that approach. Sounds like you're actually like training the gut to be able to tolerate those numbers, but I think I'd have a hard time getting anywhere near that if I wasn't at least pushing up to that in training to do it. So if Killian was able to only do 20 grams an hour in training and then do 100 on race day, that's impressive in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think it's how you approach it, right? So if we, there's metabolic efficiency testing with, I'm sure Zach, with how much fat versus how much carbohydrate are you burning, and the more carbohydrate you're putting in, the more carbohydrate you're going to burn. So I think we'll start to see this, especially with some coaches, where now that we have metabolic efficiency testing, using periodized nutrition, I think there is times like where Killian did, where, okay, maybe in training, you're teaching your body to burn more fat, and then come race day, you could have that advantage. But then on race day, you are also going to provide it with those high amounts of carbohydrate. And yeah, I can't imagine doing it. It's just because I don't think my stomach would handle that well. But again, I'm only using these high carbohydrates, like I said, in the last 8 weeks of training. Generally before that, it's just optimizing workouts, and you're not going to take in that much carbohydrate like in the threshold block or doing threshold workouts. It's just the intensity is too high.
How about you, Callie? What are you planning on? You said liquid calories are mostly the way to go. Do you have a gram total that you're aiming for, or is it just get in what you can get in?
Well, I usually aim for like 250 calories an hour. And that's all from my Goo Roctane. So I have it right here. It
There you
says
go.
60 grams. So about 60 grams. That's actually what the camera is sitting on right now, is a huge bottle of
Oh,
Roctane.
that's creative. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I need a little tripod. That'll do.
And what about
Yeah.
you?
What's your plan, fuel wise? You're an aid station person for the most part.
Yeah, I just kind of eat intuitively. I don't probably, you wouldn't want to ask like what you do, because I kind of base it off of like feeling and just, but you probably know better
Yeah, I
what
probably
would
actually know
eat.
your fueling strategy better than you do for the most part. It is
You're like,
funny
I get
because
to an aid station and see what looks good.
yeah.
I conveniently could eat pretty much off of like anything at the aid station, which
Oh,
is
that's
good.
so
But
nice.
yeah, so it works out well. And then I use some S fuels, but which is helpful for some liquid calories and caffeine. But yeah, I am much less dialed in than you all. And
It's
I don't
working
know.
for
I
you.
feel like for me,
Yeah.
I just have such a structured like day job where I constantly am like following rules and protocol. And for whatever reason, at some point in my life with running, I just said no go. And I've kind of intentionally kind of just done it by feel. And probably that doesn't necessarily lead to the best outcome, but it tends to work pretty well for me. So I go with it.
Well, I
Like,
think it might depend. It just depends on like the level of stress you're going to put on yourself with the amount of structure you decide. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, there's an endless number of things you could consider for 100 miles. And for you, it's like your release is letting go of some of the very structured stuff in your day-to-day life. And it's not that you're just like throwing caution to the wind. The way like
No.
I say it is like I like, for me personally, although I'm not doing the race, I like a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C when it comes to fueling. And my plan A and plan B are kind of the things I'm practicing a lot more in training, the things that I've known I've used a bunch of times in the past. They usually have some sort of contrast, so I don't feel like I'm having the same thing over and over again. And then plan C is just kind of like knowing what's at the aid station, so that when I get closer to it, if I decide A and B I don't really want, but I know the aid station has this and that feels good right now, I'm going to go for that. You're just kind of almost mostly plan C. Like you're
Pretty
kind of
much.
just,
Yeah.
I think I know what's at the aid station. I know I should do something. I'm going to go grab it. And then
Yeah.
there you go.
And I also do really like goo. I usually eat like the chews. I mean,
I love the
and I conveniently like don't usually have stomach issues. I probably am kind of on the lower end most of the time, but it just depends where in the race. Like when I'm feeling low energy or I'm starting, like you can feel it
Mhm.
kind of coming on climbs. I'm trained, taking a lot of extra calories. So I think I just do it intuitively. And I also am pretty familiar with that course. So I kind of know what's coming, which makes it a little easier to play it by ear, because you kind of know, like going up Devil's Thumb, it's like taking a lot of calories, because then you're like, I'm moving slower. So
Yeah.
it works.
Yeah, I got my first taste of Devil's Thumb, and
Yeah.
it's brutal. It just never ends.
Brutal.
It's gonna be a little
Yes.
different this year too out there with all the burn. I haven't seen
Michigan
it yet other than
Bluff.
pictures, but it sounds like all three of you have been out there at some
It's
point.
Michigan Bluff that's brutal. That area, that's just
Mhm.
really, it's the burn there is like, that's going to be a lot more exposed. And that climb is just, it's always rough, I think, compared to Devil's Thumb for whatever reason. It's like a little hotter at that point in the day. And I think it's a little lower. So it's
Mhm.
like, that's the one that I think is going to be I don't know, maybe it's just mentally always like in the back of my mind. Oh, like it's rough. I DNF'd after that one year. And so I just, the sheer forward progress after that, I think.
Mhm.
It was
Yeah.
definitely exposed in that
Yeah,
area.
you
That's for
on
sure.
training camp, right? Like, that was-
I mean,
yeah.
when you got to those areas, it was a stark contrast to
Yeah.
what you went through before. And it's gonna be interesting to see how
Yeah.
people race through it this year.
I feel like that might be a bit of a relative advantage for the Phoenix,
Yeah.
Arizona folks, because like, I mean, you're always exposed out there. Like there's not really,
Totally.
there's no shade no matter
Yeah.
what, even if it's cool.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
being exposed is like probably what you're just kind of used to for the most part.
Yeah, I don't even check the weather anymore. I know it's gonna be sunny and hot.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you know what you're getting out the door when you go run in Phoenix, because it's like sun, heat.
Yep,
Like
exactly. I know.
you don't
After
even have
this,
to.
we're going out for our run to get, some heat adaptation today. And
Oh yeah.
I see the sun is still shining bright.
People ask all the time on a side note, and then I won't derail the subject, but they say, oh, well, Austin's so hot too. It's like not compared to Phoenix. Like Phoenix is a different level because the sun is just,
It's
you
oppressive,
like
yeah.
live on the sun kind of.
Yeah. And you can't escape it.
No.
Yeah.
It is funny too. Like it's just once it starts, like once you
Yeah.
hit the heat of the summer, you just know, okay, this is constant throughout until the end of fall, essentially. Whereas it does get hot here in Austin, but you're gonna get like more random storms, overcast days, and alterations in the weather to like not feel like you're just like in it for the long haul necessarily the way
Yeah.
you can kind of
Yeah.
get in Phoenix.
But you guys have the humidity, which is just
It's another level
Today was
disgustingness.
the most humid or hottest day ever in June, they said.
Oh,
And I
really?
can attest this morning running, it was pretty gross out. I was like, thanks for sharing that. When I heard that during the run this morning, a couple of guys were saying, I was like, well, I'm going to be slowing down because I felt like my heart rate was really high.
Really?
And so
What's
it all
happening?
adds up.
yeah.
Sure.
Oh.
You know, that's one of the bigger things I've noticed since moving was just the way you prepare for the hot weather runs is like in the dry heat, you know, a thin layer or something, especially if you can keep it wet, is a nice little benefit. And you can even throw a pack on and it's not that oppressive. But here it's like handhelds and belts. Like you want to be like as much skin as you can, get any breeze that hits you because that the water or sweat just doesn't want to come off of you. And that is definitely a different vibe for sure.
Yeah.
I have a question. So this was something that was hard for me when we started running the same races way back in the day. And I feel like I've evolved as a human and it doesn't bother me as much. But just for somebody else, maybe it's just me being paranoid. But when we would run the same race, I would spend a lot of mental energy, like worried about what you were doing. Like I particularly like remember at Western States, I guess it was 2018, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I was like always asking, how's Zach doing? And people would be like, what are you doing? Like, why don't you concentrate on yourself? Because I think, and that was probably to my detriment. Like now I don't feel like I'm as invested. I mean, no offense. I'm very invested, but I'm not as like mentally wrapped up in that. I don't know. I've like moved on as a human in terms of the evolution, I guess, but just curious for you all, is that something you all feel like, or?
I mean, I do. So we've done two.
The male thing. They're like, no, we don't even think about you guys in the race. Yeah.
At my pace, I've got time to think about anything.
But I was very caught up in it in 2018, I think. So I'm glad it must be a female thing because sounds like you guys didn't really give it much pause.
Yeah. No, we did Black Canyon together and then Crown King together. And I remember Black Canyon, that was our first, like, we had just started dating maybe like a month before that, maybe 2-3 weeks. And so going into the race, I was like, oh, I wonder how he's doing. And I mean, I like had time to check my phone while I'm also doing 100K.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing him move up in the race. And that was the race that he got the golden ticket for. So when I saw that he got it, I was like, I don't know what mile I must have been at, like 40 or something, and been like, oh, I feel good now going into the night. But then he had to wait like 8 hours for me to finish.
You can celebrate, right?
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking of the race, what I need to do.
You're definitely the same. Like, I mean, that's totally, I just
like has blinders on.
I was wondering, Callie, if you felt the same, because like for a while that was like really hard for me for like maybe like a year or so. And now I just realize you can't like waste the mental energy on it. But that was very real for me for a couple of big races where I kind of was like, probably to my detriment, I did not have success. And it was my own fault, but it was very real.
Yeah, I did the same thing. And at Crown King too, I went to an aid station. I was like, do you know who won? And they were like, I think Scott Trayer. And I was like,
oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, oh, good. But like up until then, I was thinking like, oh, I hope his race is going well. I hope he's not having issues or anything. And then when he finished, I'm like, okay, now I can think about me.
Yeah. No. Maybe because we're behind too, so it works.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, we can ask those questions and
exactly.
I just go by like no news is good news. So if no one tells me anything bad happened, I assume Nicole's just crushing it. So
well, at that time in Hong Kong, you hid from me. So I didn't,
that's right.
You didn't want me to see that you had dropped out, and I was blissfully ignorant, and I did well because I did not know. Like I may have
That's
I mean,
true.
again, it was very fascinating. It's like, it's interesting. Don't you all think about how you evolve, like just in terms of running over the years and like what bothers you and what doesn't? And
Yep, that's true.
And
That's
even
right, actually. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
yeah, I actually usually don't like to know anything going on. Like I've told Kelly and I'll tell the person crewing me here, like I don't want people to tell me what place I'm in usually during the race. And then like at this race, I'll tell Joe, I don't want to know. And then come into Forest Hill when then it's like, okay, it's time to start racing. At that point, I'll start asking, okay, how far back am I? Because I know I race from the back. How far back am I? And then it starts being like, okay, now we're in race mode. But those first 60 something miles, I'm just kind of out there doing my own thing and just kind of waiting for the race to start. So I don't want any distractions. I don't want to know. I don't want good news or bad news. I just want to keep everything just kind of steady and chill. And then then the racing starts and I start to get really focused.
Yeah, don't tell me what's going on in the world today. Just let me
Mhm.
have my adventure until I get to the
That's
finish.
actually an interesting topic too, Scott, because like last year you were 10th place and you weren't moving back. So that means like when you got to Forest Hill, when was the first time you realized where you were and where were you like in terms of the field to get up to 10th?
I want to say it was like Michigan Bluff.
Yeah,
So
I think someone told me, and then Kyle Patari was running with me. Came in at Forest Hill and ran with me for just a mile through Forest Hill, and he had given me some tips going into the race, and he kind of broke everything down. Told, hey, you're X far back from the leader, you're X far back from this, and that was all I kind of really knew. I knew then. I didn't close as well as I would have liked to. I had a few things going on, but yeah, that's generally where it is. Even in any race I'm doing, I generally wait till the point where I actually feel like, okay, the race is on. Now I want to know things. But usually before, it's just trying not to make mistakes early. And I think if you're concerned with what other people are doing or what place you're in, it's gonna affect how you're running. So I try not to, especially in trail racing where every mile is different. Everything's different. I know for me personally, if I get to mile 60 and I'm not feeling good, or mile 70 and I'm not going to be able to close fast, then it's not going to be a good race. But I know if I can get there and if I'm going to close well, then I'm going to have a great race. So that's my main focus. It's not so much where's everyone. It's just, like I said, focused on me. And like I think that, like I said, it takes all the pressure of placing and all this stuff off me. And so it works for me, but I know other people, that's not what they want.
Yeah, well, it got you back in the race, so there's that.
Mhm.
It is an interesting thing to think about too, and you made me think of this, Scott, when you were talking about just not wanting to know early on. And I always think about these 100-milers as like, obviously there's the physical component that you have to manage. You can't go out too fast, or you want to manage your pacing properly so you're in a position to run hard at the end. But there's also the mental fatigue of just being out there that long. So I try to almost look at it as like two different things you're dealing with your mental energy and your physical energy. And obviously they will like impact one another to a degree. But I always wonder when someone like talks about it the way you do is like if that's either a intentional or unintentional way of like preserving mental energy. Because if you're thinking, oh, I'm in 21st place and I want to be in 8th or wherever at the end, I need to move it. And you're just constantly burning energy thinking about how many people you have to pass versus just kind of like putting on auto control for a while and then waiting until you get to the spot where and then the passing of people kind of becomes a little bit more of a mental boost versus like a fatiguing thing.
It's 100% for me. It's intentional for those same exact reasons. And again, it's something I learned over time, right? When in my first race, second race, it's not like that. You're thinking all these things that you don't need to be thinking. And then you get to the point where you need to put all your energy in and you have no energy to give. And so, yeah, for me, it was just, I guess, a gradual transition. And now when we're working with athletes, I try to give them that tip because, you're not going to win a race in the first 30 miles, but you can certainly lose it. And I don't like to have anxiety or anxiousness. So even like the process goals I set for myself going like for Western States, my process goals are all about things I need to do just to get myself to succeed in the next step of the race. And none of those are time or place goals.
How about you, Callie? Do you have any approach mentally for the race that you try to rehearse, or is it all just like live in the moment and take it as it comes?
It's kind of a bit of both. I do like to live in the moment, especially, first time at Western States, and there's just so much excitement in that. But I like to do whatever I can to just to stay positive or think of the positives that are going on. So like what's feeling good, what's going well, and just continue to focus on those. And anytime any kind of like little bad thought comes around, I just try and squash it with like just reminding myself to be grateful to not only just be running, but also to be running this race and running it with all these people and how magical it is. And, it's such a special race and I'm doing it for a special reason. So there's a lot of just, I guess, positivity going into this race specifically. So I'm hoping that carries me through.
Yeah. Question for you all.
Nicole's dodging her mental approach.
Yeah, I
We
was.
don't talk about that.
No, that Western States is a hard race for me because mentally it's like intertwined with so many things that have happened to me in my life. Like oddly enough, at like times that are very close to the race. And so I find myself thinking back a lot over the years, over like the 8 or so years that I just evolved as a human. So I guess I should think of it more as like a victory lap as I age, like, wow, I still have the opportunity to do this. And, it's like cool to look back and process how far you've come. So it's become like a really kind of like, I think generally now it's like a positive experience, but there have been years that it's been somewhat a little painful. So for that reason, I think Western is hard but it calls me back bizarrely enough. But just out of curiosity, how do you all what do you want from pacers when you're out there? Do you like people to talk to you or like what is your MO there? Because I see the gamut of what people look for in a pacer.
Yeah, so this is, I guess, like my second time ever having pacers. I'm used to doing hundreds solo, no crew, no pacers, just going because there's always, to me, like having or reminding myself that there are people, at an aid station waiting for me. They're thinking I'm going to get there this time. Like that just adds little pressures. But for a race like this, like I really do want a crew and I really do want pacers. So my pacers, I actually met in the middle of the Moab 240 this past October. We were all huddled around a campfire and about to endure the toughest section of Moab, which is going up Shea Mountain. It's a very steep climb and it was in the dark, and those races aren't marked just super thoroughly, so you almost need to have a nice fresh brain to like lead you up and through these areas. And I was lucky in that I met my two pacers who are going to be at Western States, Izzy and Melissa, and we all kind of like looked at each other in the fire and we were like, are we doing this? And we were like, yeah. So we all like went up Shea Mountain together, and it was this tough moment. I mean, there were moments where we're going a mile an hour because it's like this kind of steepness and your poles are just barely getting you up the next step. And it was just such a bonding moment. So when they found out that I was in Western, they reached out and they were like, can we come help you? And I was like, yes. Awesome. So I kind of want a pacer who just understands those super low moments that I might endure for this race, like I did at Moab, to just kind of be that like comfort, that blanket, that safety blanket to like get me through those tough parts and remind me that I can do hard things, that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm pretty low maintenance when it comes to a pacer. They were like, are there any words that we shouldn't say? Or what kind of foods do you want or would you look forward to? And I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. Let's just fun together. So.
Yeah, I generally don't use pacers. I never have. I don't know. If I had I generally don't run with people either. Usually running to me is my time. I work a lot. And so when I get to go running, yeah, sometimes I run with people, but for the most part, that's rare. I like to have that time. It's my time to be creative or think about things. So there's really maybe 2 or 3 people in the world that I would say, hey, if you're in the city at this time, I would have them pace me because they're really in my inner circle. But besides that, I just usually go by myself. So no pacers.
No, that's awesome. It's interesting the spectrum, like of what people want. Like I have historically had pacers, but I can see the element of like it's kind of like nice to tough it out alone and go through the process. This year I'm fortunate that I ran in college, and when we moved back to Austin, one of my really good training partners now lives in Austin. And, we used to run together 20 years ago, and now she's going to come pace me at Western, which I think is kind of cool that like of all the years, we're still like running workouts together, as older ladies. And then I also have another friend that ran with me in college who for the first time, Zach coaches her, and she's going to come out and be part of the crew, which I think is special. And then of course, I have Zach, which is fun, like that we get to share it together. So I'm always kind of happy when he runs me in, but I like to see what people like, because it's so different on the course, what you see people asking for. I just always go into, Callie, I have a recommendation. Make sure your pacers have good stories for you, because that's what I covet when I ask, can you please tell me some good stories from the day? Because there will always be interesting stories that happen out there because, like watching people and things. So if you have them like have those stories, it does make for like some funny moments to like hear about the race as it was happening.
That's a good idea.
I have a question on pacing. So this is something I always bring up, and I've brought it up, here with some of the folks with our Viper, people that ask me this kind of question on pacing. I have an opinion, and it's maybe because I do not use pacers and I have lost more than one race by getting off course. But in these championship style events, for those trying to win the event, I would question if pacers should be allowed. So for those trying to just finish the event, I 100% support as a safety. But as a trail runner, as those generally winning these events, they are professional trail runners. A big part of our sport, be it training, racing, is staying on course. And that's a challenge when you have cognitive fatigue. So it's definitely advantageous to have the pacer for some certain reasons. And I don't, it's part of the rules. You can use them, outside of maybe Run Rabbit Run. And at Leadville, your pacer can carry your gear and mule for you. So at Leadville this year, I actually may have a friend come for that reason. It's like, well, could be advantageous. But it's an interesting concept to think. Outside of Run Rabbit Run, I don't know of any championship style events that are not allowing pacers. And I think of that, like when we're running, when Zach runs for a world record or on the track, like you can't have someone pacing or in front of you setting that pace. So I wonder if our sport will transition to this. And I've heard every side of it. And of course, for some people, it takes a team to get through these 100-milers, and they're part of the team. But it's just something I would like the sport and race directors of bigger events to consider. That's something that's always been in my head.
Yeah, I feel like this is a topic that comes up a lot, but it doesn't seem to be interesting to the race directors for whatever reason in terms of making I guess it wouldn't be, maybe the better way to say it is like no one wants to really be the trendsetter there, or the race that like Western States is the trendsetter, obviously. So if they did it, they could probably set a precedent to a lot of other races. But I'm kind of with you, Scott. Like I would almost love a scenario where you couldn't have crew or pacers. And it 100%. Sounds weird coming from the guy who does the track ultras, where it's like you have a crew there all day long. But so for that, I think when you're stepping on a track to run an ultra marathon, then it's like everything is about trying to hit time splits. So there, I think it's closer to a road marathon in that case. 100%. And it's equalized. Like you don't really have an advantage or disadvantage on that because it's so easy to have that support there. Whereas I feel like a race like Western States, if they had no crew, no pacers, and that would be a standard rule, I'd vote for that if I were in the race.
I would too. I think it would just be advantageous because I think it would just be more of a problem-solving event, right? I wonder though if it's like a safety thing, especially like from a female perspective. Like there are those kinds of things that come up, especially for females. I just wonder, like,
sure,
I put it at awards.
Yeah,
and then I don't know. Maybe the way I'm really getting into like complications here and logistics, but then it's like maybe you use the resources that go into crewing and pacing and put those people out on the course so it's safer. So like,
I could just see, like, imagine the bad publicity that you would get, not only from like somebody like falling or something, but could you imagine the race where like a woman unfortunately had some type of event where I'm not saying that that's likely to happen, but I could see like the negative. I don't know. I wouldn't
definitely a lot of sides to it. And it's just something I always think about in maybe our sport goes that way, but
I think I'd vote for it personally.
I mean, it makes
I think it would
sense.
be a cooler, like more individual, like championship.
I just think it fits the entire like ethos of what
right?
it is. Like it's not, the idea is that this is this epic thing that's human powered and like just really far reaching outer limit stuff. And then the more you add to it, the less that kind of the more you can kind of contrive it, I guess. So I mean, that'd be cool. There actually is, Scott. I mean, it's not a championship race, like you said. There's a race that they're putting on now. I think it might only have gone on for like a year, but it's 100-miler with no crew, no pacer, no aid stations. They don't have anything out there.
I thought I saw that on the rock list, right?
It's in Montana.
Yeah.
I believe Montana.
Oh, I know
Montana
you're
or Idaho. Can't remember which.
Idaho, maybe. Plain
I
100.
think Plain 100 in Washington also.
Washington.
Okay. Plain 100. I think it's Plain.
Mhm.
I would die. I mean,
And
I
then-
couldn't survive. So
I would die without the aid stations for sure.
I don't wear a watch, and so I would completely.
Yeah, I
fail, so
remember
I'm
that.
not
You don't
gonna-
wear a
yeah.
watch. That's unique.
You don't wear a watch?
No,
That's
I-
kind of nice.
it's very
Totally.
free.
When she said she disconnects on race day, she disconnects. It's like, it's
Yeah.
not just the fueling strategy that she goes a little more impromptu.
Well, and the last time I wore a watch, I DNF'd, and it was a bad luck. I swear.
No,
He
sure,
gave me
fucking
a watch for my birthday, and I wore it, and I now never coming back that white watch. It's
Mm-mm.
bad luck.
It
Wow.
stays in the
funny.
closet.
There's another race too that I actually have my eye on. It's kind of on the short end of what I could probably reasonably do coming back from injury, but I still have my eye on it. Is this 100K in Tahoe that Candace Burt's putting on, and I just assume it's like a feeder in as like a training run into the Tahoe 200 because it's 100K, no crew, no pacer, just 3 aid stations, so every 15 miles.
PRT?
Yeah, it's Tahoe Rim. Yeah, it's I think it's only I know they canceled it during COVID, so they had it like the year before that, but I think it was the first year she put it on.
Mm-hmm. There were a couple people, I was talking to them on the bus going to the Robinson Flat station for a training camp who were training for that race.
Oh, really?
At the training camp.
Nice.
Yeah. So they were just because it's it's so close. They were like, oh, this is perfect. Like
Yeah.
it's like literally a training camp, but for this other race. So it works
Yeah.
out.
And I just thought that was kind of cool. It's like, well, you have 3 aid stations with drop bags. I'll just have like essentially 4 packs, and each aid station has a pack, and I'm just gonna wear the one, drop off, grab the other, and just boom, boom, boom. And then there is I mean, I've done both directions, no pacer, no crew, and then the whole business. And the funny thing is I did Javelina in 2016 and 2017. 2016, I was kind of like a last minute decision, no crew, no pacers, just showed up and had a great time and felt like I probably was better off without it. 2017, I did bring pacers. I did a little worse, but I actually think given that year, the way I ended up racing, I probably would have dropped out had I not had pacers.
Yeah,
So
sure.
that begs, Scott, your question of like, was that fair? Because like, had I dropped out with no pacers, then it's one of those things where like, if a pacer saves your race, did they save your race or did they give you an unfair advantage? And then, yeah, you get into that whole conversation.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't win though, at least. So I won the year with no crew and pacers.
There you go.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're a week and a half out. When do you all head out to Western States?
I'm leaving Monday. The Goo House is going to be all set up in Olympic Valley, so I'll head straight there and get used to being at 6,000 feet.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, you leave Wednesday.
Wednesday. Yep.
So staying here as long as possible
Yeah.
to watch the old dog before we have to drop him off.
Yeah.
You can kind of see him right here.
Oh, I thought I saw something wandering around in the
Yeah,
background.
he's got a white
Senior
face.
dog was not allowed in the room, which we can talk about after the podcast. It was devastating for me. I could hear her during the podcast trying to get in.
Oh,
It's
I
so
know.
funny because
We'll let her
they
down.
have not so much our older dog, but our younger dog is just completely attached to Nicole, and Nicole like just eggs it on too. So
Of course I do.
and it's just like if she's not home, they're waiting by the door, or if we're in a room and the door's closed, they're waiting by the door. And as soon as she's out,
Mine is attached to him. As soon as he gets on the couch to work, mine will leave me wherever I am and go and sit right next to him with
Oh.
his head in his lap.
They're the best.
They are.
We can have a reunion after because you can bring in grandma. What's yours? What's the name?
His name's Cloudy Brown, but we just
Oh.
call him Cloudy. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He's 14.
Ours is
Oh.
Stella, and she is 14 too.
Oh,
So we
wow.
call her grandma, or she started responding to it, so it's kind of funny.
That's
So
funny.
she's like she knew
Yeah.
she knew the assignment to take on that
Yeah.
name.
The funny thing is, so Nicole and I are
Oh.
coming up on our 5th year of marriage. And so I adopted Stella, our older dog, when I was
Mhm.
welcomed into the family. And it was, Nicole was like, oh, well, I've had Stella for X number of years. And we celebrated
Oh.
last year her 15th birthday. And then Nicole was looking at some old Facebook stuff and realized that she was not 1, but 2 years off.
I don't know how I did that. I'm not.
So she's now back to 14 and turning. She's turning 14 or 15.
She's turning 14.
She's turning 14 this year.
Oh, that's great.
Whereas we thought,
I don't know how I did that. I don't even want to pretend like that's reasonable. Poor grandma. But she has
she's old either way.
2 more years to live.
Oh, close enough, you know.
Oh,
Yeah.
And also you just made her a little younger, so that she
Yes,
probably
exactly.
takes that.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. So we'll have to get out to Arizona at some point and visit after Western States and
Yeah.
maybe meet up for
Be
a
here.
run or something to celebrate all 3 of your success stories. I'm sure they're going to be all of them. But before I let you go, we should go over I know goals are a bit of a touchy subject, but if you have goals, or at least just like maybe if you don't have a specific goal, like what is the experience you're looking to get from the Western States 100 this year, that would be fine too.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to finish. And I want to finish not having to go to the hospital. So I guess that's a good
That's a good goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know. It wasn't the best training cycle for me. I fractured my toe in April, so I've been running with it like casted, and they think it's gonna hold. I went for new images. It's a small piece, so I'm really going into it no expectations. So I hope if I run well, I think I'm fit enough that I can certainly get in the top 10, but I also know that there's a chance my day ends early. So these next 10 days, I'm just focusing on trying to believe in myself and put myself in the best position mentally that let's go out there and close fast in the last half of the race.
I'm betting Scott 5th now.
Yeah.
Not putting any pressure on you. How about you, Nicole?
I'm just trying to go out with a bang, right? Like I've been fortunate to run the race a lot of times, but this was kind of an extra bonus year that I really didn't expect. And so I figure if I can have my best day out there, you know, that's my goal, like give it my all and enjoy, because again, I feel like at this point, I'm getting to the point where I don't think I probably will necessarily be running at the same level for much longer. So, you know, might as well enjoy the moment.
Yeah. My prediction is that it won't be Nicole's last year, because she's told me this is her 3rd Western States that it's been her last time at Western States.
Yeah. Draws me back.
Yeah, Nicole, you're crushing. You have many more years. You
You'll
crushed
end up in it one
Evelina,
year.
you crushed Bandera, and you're gonna crush here.
No, well, you guys are gonna crush. It's so exciting to see you both racing, and it's been fun cheering you all on from watching all your stories, and it's gonna be a great day.
It's been fun training for the same race for 6 or however months.
Yeah, you're on the same schedule.
That's fun. That is fun.
So we've been going through everything together basically, and we'll go out to Ord together. We'll both be on the couch recovering together and talking about it and talking strategies for the next long run. So it's been a fun journey, and yeah, I'm kind of gonna take this race as a little victory lap for this training cycle.
And that's an underrated point. When you're on the same schedule, it's not even a quick, because I think some people will ask Nicole and myself, like, well, do you guys run together? And it's like, when we're on the same schedule, it's less about that, although we do sometimes. It's less about that. It's more about like what you just said, Callie. Like, if we're on the same schedule and we're both doing a long run, we're probably going to feel miserable at the same times, and we're going to feel like refreshed at the same time. So then we're like matching up in our attitudes more or less, and that's usually a little more convenient for the other areas of life too.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Especially the weekends, just run and sit at the pool the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to
For
worry
sure.
about leaving the partner home for
Yeah.
3 or 4 hours and
Exactly.
it's fun.
Don't forget about the dogs.
The dogs too, yeah.
Exactly.
Gotta
I
be
know.
part
We
of
do a lot of scheduling around the dog.
Yeah, that's the reality. But before we let you go, I want to let the listeners know where they can find either of you on social media. I know, Scott, you coach too, so if you got a website for that and everything, please share that, and I'll also put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'm both at Run Faster on Instagram and runfaster.com. And that is RUNFASTAH, because I am from Boston. So FASTA is spelled FASTA with the AH.
There you go, and you got the Boston green too.
The green.
Green. Yeah, and I don't have a website, but I am at Callie Vinsonn with 2 N's at the end for Instagram.
And don't underestimate the lack of website. Callie's Instagram page is a lot of fun. So I encourage
Yeah.
everyone to go out and check out some of the great reels that you put up over
Yes.
there.
You're so
Fun to
talented.
create. I've been a creative for my entire career, so being able to do it just like on the side has been fun and motivating.
Yeah, no doubt. Hopefully, well, we're hoping to get a great Western States reel out of it. So no pressure, but
Oh,
that's my expectation
five
for
of
you.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for having us on. It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, likewise. We'll look
Yeah.
forward to seeing you out at Olympic Village and then in Auburn to celebrate a bit. So yeah, thanks for joining us.
Heck yeah.
Absolutely.
Hey folks, just a quick reminder that this episode's sponsors include Element-T electrolytes and Delta G ketone esters. Element-T electrolytes can be found at drinklmnt.com/HPO and are offering a free sample pack with your first purchase. And Delta G ketones can be found at deltagketones.com. Also, give them a follow at deltag.ketones on Instagram. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter. Hey folks, thanks for checking out this episode of the podcast. For those of you who are regular listeners, you'll likely know I'm also a professional endurance athlete and coach. If you're looking for a little extra help with your training and programming, I do offer individualized coaching options where you can work directly with me one-on-one. I'll personalize your plan and even scale it up to email collaboration and regular consultations. You can also access either of those on their own if you just want to contact me as you're navigating your fitness journey. I also have some ready-made plans. The ready-made plans follow my coaching philosophy, and they scale from 5 kilometers all the way up to 100 miles and come in 3 different levels. So whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced, I've got something for you there. And most recently, I also just added a strength athlete's guide to endurance program, which will help someone who is primarily a strength athlete who wants to either do an endurance event for the fun of it, bolster up their cardiovascular fitness, or just try something out, try something new. So those programs are built to be able to supplement a strength program so you won't have to give up on your gains in the gym while you're going after some running or endurance related fitness goals. You can find all those things on my website at zachbitter.com. Thanks for checking out this episode.